Great. Hello, welcome to Disruptive Technologists webinar for today, Wednesday, May 20th. Thanks so much for coming to our session. This is our third session of the month. In May, we're going to be handling issues around D&I, and we've got a great panel today. While we miss seeing everybody in person over at the Microsoft Tech Center that we normally do, we're glad we can get together this way online. This will be the last session for the month of May. We'll be publishing a new schedule for the month of June. Very much looking forward to your questions and your participation. For this, we have a fabulous moderator and great set of panelists with us tonight. I'd like to recognize our founder and current organizer and publisher, Lauren Keeson. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our moderator, Oliver. Oliver, take us away.
Absolutely. Well, thank you and welcome. Very glad you can make it. We're going to be adding to some of the technologies, some of the conversations we had about technology last week and the week before. So you've got quite a few of the same panelists. Some extra, some new. So without further ado, Jeff, could we have the first slide?
Oliver, do you mind if I just break in for a second?
Yes, please.
I wanted to quickly just thank our sponsors, McCarter in English, chaired by Dave Soren. The McCarter in English is a 50-person attorney, venture capital, and emerging growth companies practice. And it represents startup, emerging growth, and mature tech-enabled, and life sciences enterprises, and the investors who support them in all phases of development, from ideation to IPO, and from concept to cash. Regularly counted among the top 10 active law firms serving these communities by PitchBook, McCarter is delighted to be a Disruptive Technologists sponsor, and we're thrilled to have them. We're also thrilled to have Microsoft Reactor as our partner. Microsoft Reactors are neighborhood campuses where developer and startup communities meet, learn, and connect. They combine training on the latest technology, community meetups, and events with leaders in the industry. Reactors create an inclusive community for interaction and inspiration. And I wanted to thank Zeotech, which is Jeff. You just heard him speaking. He's also our webinar director. We're a partner of Disruptive Technologists. They provide innovative technologies that greatly extend the intelligence, functionality, and monetization options of all forms of web, video, and audio. Its flagship product, the Zeotag Media Publishing Platform, is a robust host-based framework that uses sophisticated metadata to make online content easily searched, navigated, shared, and ultimately consumed. And then, of course, Hint Water. While all of our sponsors are with us at our Microsoft location in Times Square quarterly, they're not here right now, but I still want to thank them. Hint, our oldest sponsor, who's been with us from the beginning, contains no sugar, diet sweeteners, calories, or preservatives. Their water brands are non-GMO certified and Whole30 approved. They're vegan and contain no MSG, nuts, soy, or gluten. And their bottles have always been BPA free, and they're continuously improving their bottling to reduce the amount of plastic and other non-renewable resources. Their goal was to use 40% less plastic per bottle than their original 16-ounce bottle. Sorry about that. Oliver, back to you.
No, thank you. That's great. Right, so the format, as always, is I'll introduce the panelists, and then we'll get on to our big three questions. The questions are technology-based, but very much based on what's going on right now. So firstly, a quick disclaimer. All the options are the options of the panelists, and it doesn't necessarily reflect their company. It's important that people can speak freely, so that's why that's there. So on to the panelists, without further ado. Ogilvie is a partner at McCarter in English and heads up the D&I practice. Arnell, is Arnell on today?
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Okay,
Not yet.
If he's here, we'll come back.
Okay.
Esther Dyson, the executive founder of Wellville and astronaut, or rather astronaut in training. Voltaire, next slide, please. Voltaire, the founder of WeUp and heavily into social entrepreneurship. And last and certainly not least, and new for this panel, Dennis Velco is the CEO of OuterBuro and the founder of LinkedIn's largest LGBT network group. So here's the panelists. And of course, I'm Oliver Christie. Thank you. And let's get on to our first question without further ado. The New York City's poorest neighborhoods are having twice the rate of deaths from COVID at the moment than the more affluent neighborhoods. Is this just to be expected in modern America? Is this the new normal? And this really is for anyone on the panel. I mean, do we think this is acceptable, and why isn't technology playing a bigger part?
This is Esther. I'll jump in as someone who lives in New York. And it is to be expected, but it should not be permitted to return. It's not a normal we like. It reflects a whole bunch of things. First, a lot of the rich people have left. Second, poor people, and especially minority people, for a whole bunch of reasons, tend to be less healthy. So they're physically more vulnerable to the disease, but they're also doing jobs that require them to keep going out, interacting with people. You know, the frontline heroes are not just the doctors, they're also the people in the supermarket, the people who bring the packages to the rich people, the people who clean the subways, the people who use the subways. And it's, you know, we're called disruptive technologists. This is exactly the period for which, in a sense, we've been waiting. I mean, it's a horrible disruption, it's killing people, but at the same time, let's not let it go to waste. And my hope, at least, is that when things get back not to normal, but when the virus ends up either disappearing or being easily vaccinated against or something, we need to build a society where we're not just all in it together, so to speak, but we're all in the same boat. And right now there's a whole lot of different classes of boats.
Moy, you're a long-time New Yorker. Do you expect it to get this bad? Do you think the kind of technologies out there are really being applied?
So, you know, with regard to New York, I think what you're seeing in New York, you're pretty much seeing in a lot of the major cities, at least in the United States. I think, as Esther said, I don't think we should be surprised that it happened. I think it's a long time coming. There's been health disparities for ages, lack of access to quality healthcare, good healthcare, preventative medicine, preventative care, things. I don't think we should be surprised. And like Esther, I agree. I don't think it's acceptable. And I think, you know, our challenge is, what are we going to do about it, other than just talk about it and say we're not happy about it and we're kind of horrified, right? Like, what are we all going to do as companies, as citizens, as voters, and all of it? And so I think that that's where we find ourselves right now. Again, you know, we talk about all these essential people who happen to be largely women and diverse people, right? All these essential people, but we don't pay them like they're essential. And, you know, question whether they're treated like they're essential. And so they're going to suffer the biggest brunt if they lose in terms of job losses. A lot of them are in entertainment, hospitality, retail, largely women and diverse people, right? And then in terms of the health and being exposed to the virus now and in the future until this is resolved, they're still going to be at the biggest risk. So I think the question for everybody, you know, at all levels, individuals all the way up to the highest levels of government is, what are we going to do about this? And how are we going to try and make it not as bad as it is? And how do we use technology to help us? And then on the technology side of it as well, we also have to talk about, again, we've heard about the digital divide forever and ever and ever. And now it's really come back to show the impact of the digital divide. We've got kids who need to be educated and who even within 2 months, are not getting the education they need in many areas of the country or cities or rural areas have. And the digital divide is really gonna catch up right now. And that's another thing we have to address. So I think we've got a lot of things to do. And I think the tech field can play a major role.
I mean, especially I think as the digital divide means we could have had a cure from one of the people who is on the wrong side of the digital divide. Now, of course, we can't get it. People are cut off. Dennis, are you seeing the same sort of thing for where you are?
Yes, I was actually just about to chime in before you snapped that up there. Here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, there's a huge economic divide. We have people from all over the world and all over the country who come to South Florida and use it as vacation spots, multimillionaires, in multi-million-dollar condos on the beach and so forth. And a vast majority of the jobs, although there are higher intellectual jobs, like, for example, I'd like to, give a shout out to Citrix Technology Corporation, who has a major headquarters in Fort Lauderdale. And a lot of technology, it's becoming a budding technology scene, actually. But the vast majority of people who are going to work every single day are working in the hospitality industry, the service industries and so forth, as all of you have just also indicated. There is an absolute, very clear, visible divide. I have friends who are sitting very comfy with their stocks and so forth and retirement funds and everything that they have, and so thankful that they have that comfort. But I know absolutely hundreds of people who are at risk on so many levels, on a financial level, because their waiters, their bartenders and so forth, all of, and for example, bars, they're not being opened up for quite some time. And then also, like New York, Fort Lauderdale is a very large LGBTQ population, and so and has a high population of those living with at-risk health issues such as HIV as well. And of course, it being Florida, sometimes nicknamed God's waiting room, no matter what your sexual identity is, it's a higher percentage of senior citizens, retired people. And so not only on the HIV front, but also, and other health factors for that, but then just the age of the population it's a huge risk factor.
Are you seeing much in terms of technology, which is, should we say, helping all these different groups, or people are sort of left to their own devices, really?
Well, if there is technology that is being leveraged, it's not being leveraged enough, because I'm not seeing it as a citizen, and someone who takes a walk every day. So the biggest technology really that's being leveraged is, frankly, Facebook. As far as getting communication out there, restaurants have just started opening up this last Monday, and everyone has been very forward in their communication about the rules and so forth, about wearing masks and the waiter when it comes and all of that. So it's been very encouraging, and people that I'm connected with directly in the community of Fort Lauderdale, everyone's being very thoughtful and pragmatic and cautious. I know some people who, no matter what opens up, They say they have their groceries delivered, everything's delivered. They're not planning to leave their home for probably another 3 to 4 weeks, no matter what anyone says.
Yeah, a strange new normal, really.
Yes.
Voltaire, what's been your experience of this? Are you finding things still very shut down where you are?
Well, I think I'm calling from Accra, Ghana, in West Africa. So here, I think that the people have been quite diligent. You know, the government, I think, was very early at shutting down the international airport. When they reported the cases were in the, you know, hundreds or like low thousands. And then they had tested about 30,000 people. And so now we're about up to, I believe, 180,000 people tested around there. And of that, only 5,000, I believe, have had been diagnosed with the virus. And then you have high recovery rate and only 30 people who have passed over a 3-month span. And they've done the largest testing in all of Africa. It's argued, you know, other countries are like, no, we've done the largest testing. And so I think for here, what they got right is people fell in line fairly quickly, the private sector as well as the public sector, where every building you walk into, you wash your hands when you step in, someone opens the door for you, metal's not touched. So I think that what they got right is compliance early from top down.
Why do you think that is? I mean, do you think was technology to play a part, or was it just seeing what's happening in the US, or better leadership?
So I think there's a couple of things. I think one, I think that there is a stronger communal culture. Two, I don't think the issue itself has become a political football. I do believe in the US, it's moved from the issue of public health to money and power. And that's what decisions are being made off of more so than the issues of public health. Here, I think that due to previous circumstances with their issues with Ebola in West Africa or other viral outbreaks, they understand that it's better to get on top of things very early. And they also know that if it gets really bad, they don't necessarily have the infrastructure from a hospital standpoint to be able to deal with a really bad problem.
What are you doing mostly in terms of communication? Is it Facebook? Is it SMS? How are people getting information?
I think it's primarily Facebook and WhatsApp, but that's Facebook. And so, or Instagram, and that's Facebook. So I think mostly Facebook products are the things that are pushing the most of communication and information. One thing that I wanted to say, when it comes to, you know, solution-oriented,
So you're dropping out a bit there. Let's see if he comes back. No, sorry, bad Wi-Fi, I think. But I'm sure he'll be back, and we'll get back to that question. Esther, what technologies are you seeing that you like out there, or kind of approaches to tech? I think Esther's dropped off. Well, let's move on. Dennis,
I'm here.
Oh no, here we are.
I just, that wasn't technology. That was me forgetting to unmute myself. So I'm
sorry, guys.
Welcome
Go
back.
right ahead.
To me, the interesting things that are happening, and it's one, AI is making it more visible. You know, the statistics, the data about the disparities are much easier to see and to notice. They're, you know, but when you come to, we were talking about who needs to help make these changes. Ultimately, it's us as voters, because the disparities are a social collective problem. And we need to start putting money towards the education of everybody, not just people who live in rich school districts. We need to ensure that there's childcare, that the disparities in maternal health, which then kind of lead to disparities in childhood development and so forth. We need to start right at the beginning. And that requires a collective change towards investing in human capital as well as physical infrastructure, and human capital across the board.
I mean, do you think we're actually going to get there, or do you think this has highlighted what a modern America actually is?
It's, I believe both.
It is very divided.
Yes.
And actually, this is what we've got. Is this as good as we're going to get? No,
I think enough of us are being distressed and dismayed. I mean, that's what I'm spending my life on, you know? And you have to be an optimist or you won't even try. But yeah. I think some change is coming, or is it going to turn into paradise? No, but I think, you know, believe me, I'm not alone. There's lots of, but it needs to be a collective decision ultimately. Second, just things like telemedicine, making medical care, making access to mental health cheaper helps resolve that problem slightly. But the real thing that needs to happen is the money that the government is handing out, they need to invest it. And they need to invest in training people for the new jobs, because a lot of jobs are disappearing and there will be lots of new jobs. Most of them are care and healthcare and teaching and education and so forth. And we need to be training people to do these jobs rather than simply handing out money. And then when it's over, quote, we'll just be bidding up the salaries of the few workers. We should be training lots of workers and then paying them what they're worth.
Yeah, so let's carry on this thought. What do we expect post-COVID world to look like? Let's talk about the positives. I mean, where we've got a lot more technology and access to tech. Do we think we're going to get there sooner, or do you think it's it'll come when it comes?
I think that it's tied to what ideas get out there and people getting around solid ideas that solve things. What I was going to say is, you know, we hear this conversation about being at war, and so I think you can take old solutions during war times where, let's say, if somebody went to World War II or Vietnam, they come home and they get a VA loan, right? Or they get a grant. So if we're talking about these people that are on the front line, there's no reason why, if you're, on the front line and you're a nurse or a doctor or a trash collector, that you can't have your student loans paid off, or that you can't have access to college, or that if you want to start a business that you get access to $50,000 of startup capital because you were on the front line during the crisis. And how you integrate that with technology is you create an app that has people that are involved in those different professions and the amount of hours they put in, and you put a certain amount of tier system based off of their reward. I think the solutions are there, right? I think that people have ideas, but if you hear a good idea, right, will you assemble it? Will you get behind it? And I think a lot of times the problems we deal with in society, it's not that the solutions aren't there. I think we have a IKEA box that says freedom on it, and it's just up to who wants to assemble the solution and stay dedicated to a good idea that can disrupt.
Moy, what are you seeing in terms of good solutions, or what would you like to see more of? seems
Well,
to...
I think, you know, you're saying what good things could come out of this, or I think we now know that we can use technology to educate more than we have in the past. You know, I don't think anything is going to replace the one-on-one teaching, but we can absolutely reach more students at all different levels with technology, if it's, you know, with the right kind of technology. And you really kind of erase the access issue, right? The same thing about, I think Esther mentioned telemedicine. I mean, you know, my parents have gone to like 4 or 5 different appointments in the past month, and I'm stunned how seamlessly it has worked. Again, nothing's going to replace the in-person doctor's visits every now and again, but look how much can be done through technology. And we would be, as a world, as a country, crazy to completely go back to normal, right? Same thing with working, all the things that we never thought we could do remotely. Again, it's not gonna replace the importance of the relationships and the working together and all of that, but we've learned a lot in 2 months, every industry. And so I think there's a lot that we can take forward. A lot of it is gonna depend very much on technology, right? And we see how important it was. I always say to some of my friends when we're talking, like, could you imagine if this had happened 10 years ago here?
Right.
The kids wouldn't have school. We couldn't work. I know on my job, we couldn't work like we do. So I think technology is going to hold the key to a lot of our future successes and our growth.
So you mentioned teaching. How much teaching does McCarter do at the moment? There's obviously a lot internal, but could you teach students right now about D&I? Well, you've got the platform.
Oh yeah. So I mean, I think you can. There's a lot that we found out that we can do on Zoom, and do if we have to. It's not the ideal platform, right? We're having summer interns this summer. You know, we went back and forth. Can we still have interns? How do we have interns if half the office won't even be there, or probably even more than that? What do we do? And, you know, we said, well, we're not going to give up on that. There's got to be a way we can still make it a really substantive program for students who are interested in law, or, you know, in our firm, or just law in general. And we've got to be creative and use the technologies that we have to make this work, you know. And I think, you know, so we can teach. You know, we're going to have the panel sessions that we would have with attorneys and interns in person in a conference room. Some of them will be online, you know, and we're not going to give up on that. And I think for every industry, in particular the tech industry, even with all the challenges we have right now and the limitations for next year or so, like, we should not use it as an excuse to stop and figuring it out. How do we grow our companies, and if diversity and inclusion is something that's important to you, how are you going to keep going with it? Because there's no reason to stop.
Yeah. Dennis, how are you changing?
You pop up right exactly whenever I'm wanting to. Awesome. So kind of going on that education, you know, for many years now, here in the U.S., there are educational platforms. There's one, I believe it's called K-12. It's used for at-risk students and so forth. My nephew, who is in the other room right over there, just finished his first year of college, and the last was done all online. Now, how is that pertinent for a law firm, and how do you get that? What's the cost? What's the, all of that? But there are tools out there right now today that's been being used successfully for many years. My past neighbor in Columbus, Ohio, was actually an English school teacher on K-12, and I was a neighbor with her for 3 years. So the technology is for that particular portion of it is there. Just finding the right tool, because there are many pertinent to your organization, your price point, and so forth. But being able to educate, matter of fact, just last night on the news, I saw this company that's based just up the street in Tampa, Florida, who's just created, because of the deficit of people who, truckers who drive all of our goods from point A to point B, so that toilet paper and so forth and hand sanitizer is on your local shelves to buy. high because they have a deficit right now of people because of them getting sick. They were looking for how to be innovative and to train new truck drivers. And so this company, right in Tampa, Florida, don't recall the name off the top of my head, but they altered one of their curriculum. And now there is an accredited solution for training truck drivers that's all virtual online, including testing. And so they only have to then do a one-person in-person test before they get their license and get on the road. So lots of technology out there and lots of innovative companies in technology who are looking to solve these various problems. And so I was very surprised and quite pleased to see that last night on the news. And
do you think the LGBTQ community is going to be a setback with what's happening at the moment? I don't just mean in terms of government,
yes. I think personally, it's unfortunate. As I say it, corporate policies, company policies are the intent of the company, and it's frankly also CYA. Like look simply at sexual harassment. It's been at a federal and state law since 1978, and look at every company of 50 employees or more, the education and effort that goes through and annual training and so forth, yet it still happens all the way up to you know who. So, big house. So when we're looking at issues like discrimination, and that's just not based on their sexual identity, because one of the interesting, I think it's interesting and unique things about the LGBT community is we are LGBT, but we are also everything else. We are Asian. We are female, we are male, we are transgender, we are also African, okay? We are African American, we are veterans, like I'm a US veteran. And so one of the things that I would like to, I guess, ask employers to do is, number one, if you want to really look at diversity candidates, focus like many companies do, where I can think of Aetna Healthcare, for a shout out to you, Mary, is her whole job as a corporate recruiter is to recruit people with disabilities and people who are LGBT. Forward-thinking companies are realizing also that it becomes a financial benefit when you focus on diversity and inclusion because of all the different mindsets. Now, how will it possibly affect in the diversity and inclusion space is also understanding that for LGBT people, are the policies of the organization in line with some of the unique things about the community? For example, is there equality when it comes to parenting leave, for example? I'm an adoptive parent. My son is 10 years old. I'm Poppy, my ex is Daddy, okay? So does the companies have the policies in place that, on its surface, it's yes, it's great to have, a sexual identity and all of that policies and transgender healthcare, but, we also have to look at some of what might not be considered LGBT policies, such as family healthcare, family leave. Being able to, let's say you're, wherever you are, hopefully, you may be in a global organization, and having family leave policies to be able to take care of someone who you might not be legally married to in the country that you live in, but that employer recognizes and values that relationship to give those employees the same benefits that they afford everyone else.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, let's move on to our second question. So the Google Apple contact tracing app update is just released today. Is it really too little too late? And is it even the right approach? US cases first started turning up in February, 3 months later. we've got two companies with a market cap of over $2 trillion. And the solution from big technology has been, you know, a tracing app which may be limited use. I mean, do we think it's going to work? And did we expect too much from big tech? Esther, do you want to jump in there?
Well, I mean, there's a bunch of things to be said about this. First of all, you know, tracing is still very important. It's also still very invasive. And it's not just will the tech work, but will people use it? And, you know, the more invasive it is, the better it works. The more compliant and obedient people are and less likely to resist being surveilled, the more likely it is to work, but they're also more likely to stay at home if they're sick, even without somebody watching them. So it's, you know, I think it's going to vary a lot by community and sort of by local culture. But even, I mean, with or without tracing, you have people who, you know, just like wander out into the bars and breathe at each other, and you have other people who scream at me if I'm walking down a windy street not wearing a mask. And, you know, so it's, the question is much more human behavior. That the technology could work if people were forced to use it, but, you know, people will get two phones and leave one at home, or I mean, so many things depend. Also, if you're monitoring my contacts, my Bluetooth doesn't know if the person I was sitting near to was wearing, you know, whether we were wearing masks, whether we had a plexiglass shield between us. So the information is going to be very, very messy. It's, you know, then you have the contact tracing where people are actually calling people all the time. I don't know. I would love for it to work, but I don't think we can count on it making a difference. I think, sorry, go ahead.
I think also what's important is when we're coming up with things that solve things, we have to ask ourselves, what is the value exchange, right? From society to the corporate, right? So if we're giving up our personal privacy and they're getting this value that is data in perpetuity that generates mass amounts of value for their corporation, right? The question is, are we giving that away in exchange for the promise of safety and helping, you know? And if that's the case, I think that we definitely don't know how to negotiate at the business table as citizens, you know. And so that being said, I think that a lot of the solutions, whether it be Apple or the government, a lot of it comes down to what is the intent? Is it coming at the table to create this technology for the purpose of public health? Or, and that's leading at the forefront of all decision making? Or is it for, you know, money and power? And I think that the moment that it's for money and power, you're gonna compromise, you know, public health. And so I think that's the challenge, you know, when you look at this, is that, you know, if they're treating the citizen like this now without contact tracing, you know, the corporates and the government, what makes you think if you give them more power that they'll do right by you?
So quick question to everyone on the panel. Are you going to use the Google Apple app? Are you going to say yes to contact tracing?
Can I jump in for a sec, again, for an LGBT perspective? Because I curate world news on a daily basis, just yesterday, an article came out of Thailand, where someone without all the technology, so just think about once the technology, if it's adopted, would happen, but a vacationer was traveling, went to an establishment, a bar, had contact with numerous people. Those people contracted coronavirus, and then all of the tracing that happened, it basically turned the entire community upside down. And of course, it then became known by parents and family and friends that those individuals were at that gay establishment, and people have been turned out of their homes, disowned by their family, and put to the streets in this time. It's very heart-wrenching. And when we're looking at doing contact tracing and we have people coming in from all over the world, coming into Fort Lauderdale, it's a huge mecca, just like New York and so forth. They go back to their home countries. They could be turned away from their families. They could be imprisoned, and they can actually be put to death just for being LGBT. So contact tracing in the LGBT community is likely not going to be well received. Just letting everybody know.
Yeah, no, it's stark. Moy, would you use an app? And do you think what does the legal look like? I mean, do you think, from a legal point of view?
I mean, I think there's so many. There's so many questions that I have because I honestly don't know a lot about these apps. I'll tell you personal, I'm the person who has every privacy setting turned on like to the highest level. Like I'm the person who the app makers hate because I don't want to be tracked everywhere. That's just me. But so these apps, I mean, there's so many questions. Is it going to be voluntary or mandatory? Okay.
Yeah, at the moment in the
And
US,
what are they going to do with your data?
Right? So is it voluntary? Is it mandatory? As Voltaire mentioned, what's the intent? What's the purpose? What's the goal? What's going to happen to my information? There's going to be so many legal issues around any kind of use if it's anything less than voluntary, right? And there'll just be so many legal questions coming from this. And again, it's not to say that it won't be useful or beneficial, but any company using an app like this or requiring an app like this is going to have to do all of that background research and consulting with legal and other professionals well in advance. But again, assuming that it's voluntary, I mean, if people want to do it, for some people, something like this might give them peace of mind and feel like they can go into the workforce even more so. For others, it's going to be, it's Big Brother watching me and there's no way I'm doing this, right? So I think it's going to be all across the board. And I just think I think for companies, if it's going to be part of your return to work policy or something of that nature, you just have to really consult with your attorneys and ask the right questions about, what's our goal? How far are we going? Is there any less invasive way of getting the same information, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather be tested at work than tracked all over. And, there's so many questions about what they do with the data. Is somebody actually going to enforce that? I mean, the whole data supply chain is another big thing that we as a country need to start resolving going forward.
Yeah.
Esther, you sit on the board for 23andMe.
Sorry, Lauren's on mute, but she's trying to do something.
Oh, right, okay.
Whatever.
Yeah, Lauren,
okay.
Oliver,
I'm wondering if Devin, who's one of our attendees, had something to say about. He said that it's telling that there are tracking technology, COVID tracker, out of Stanford, for example, that use Bluetooth and are anonymous, and they are not the technology that was chosen. I don't know, Devin, if you wanted to unmute yourself, but he had that in the chat, and I just thought maybe you might want to say something.
So I mentor a team out of Stanford that created a COVID tracker technology, and it uses Bluetooth and it monitors anonymously. So it would solve Dennis's problem in the LGBT community. And they got as far as the COVID task force in Washington. And the technology that was chosen was not the anonymous one. Theirs is anonymous, and there's a couple of other people who are using the same methodology. It's anonymous. They were not chosen. So.
Yeah, I think that says an awful lot about where we are at the moment with big tech, big companies, which actually leads us very nicely on to question number 3. Amazon is trying to call itself the new Red Cross. So without useful government assistance, I mean, is this a new reality? Is this where we have to turn? And do we trust Amazon with saving our lives?
No, they have to do a better job of saving the lives of their workers.
Agreed.
And, you know, Jeff has changed so much from where he started. It's, you know, it's like, yes, there are a lot of people to be served, but there are ways to do that without destroying the lives of the people who do that. I mean, starting with just paying them decently. And, you know, they've spent a lot of money to give them protective equipment, but not fast enough. They don't enforce it. It's really scary.
So actually on that very note, I have a feeling I might have got COVID-19 from an Amazon package, which came from a New Jersey warehouse where people had COVID and were forced to work. And these are minimum wage jobs. They're forced to work, they're not allowed to unionize. Yeah, it's quite telling. I mean, but are we stuck with the technology we've got? You know, do we think it will change?
Yeah, I mean, medically, it's, did you touch the package and then wipe your nose, or why do you think that?
Well, it's just the timing, because we've been completely locked down, and the package came very quickly, and yeah, at the time wasn't wiping packages down. So it's a question mark more than anything else. But do I trust Amazon? That's the question, I think.
Well, you know, I think that when somebody shows you who they are, believe them. I'm a firm believer of that. You know, if somebody had the opportunity to do things different, as Esther said, and there's a consistency. In some ways, I don't think they become the problem. The people that give them second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 10th chances, they actually become the problem because they expect a different outcome, right? From a source that showed you how they want to operate, right? Which is rooted in maximum ROI. Maximum ROI is what drives these decisions, right? And so, and I'm not saying I'm against profit. I'm talking about always making the decision of maximum ROI 100% of the time. That's what makes it a problem. So if somebody has shown you that this is what their values are, and they've said this is how we operate, I'm more interested in the people that keep going to that well instead of saying, you know what, you know, let's figure out how to be resilient on our own and create new services, new ways, new different things. Or the question is, are we addicted to financing our own oppression?
Yeah, and I mean, but what's even weirder is I think there are going to be a lot of people who will dump Amazon for almost anybody when they get the chance. I mean, I don't think they're going to go bankrupt, and they've got lots of customers, but at the same time, I think they've shown their spots. And
so actually on that note, who are the companies you like? Who do you feel has been doing a good job, have been looking after workers, a good service, good in the community, who not necessarily apart from Amazon, but a shout out to anyone who's doing something fantastic.
I may have I suspect a lot of people will disagree with me, including people I know quite well, but I've been working with Walmart in Muskegon in particular, and you know, they're not perfect. They have lots of, not every store manager cares totally about their employees, but they really have a sense that their associates and their customers are part of whom they serve. Whereas, you know, with Amazon, we got to get maximum money from our customers. With Walmart, some of these people are associates, some of them are associates' families, some of them are community members, and they come and go, but we're so large that we're part of that community. They try to make things cheap, both competitively and because that's their mission to serve. But they're, from the people I know within the organization, they are genuinely more concerned about the welfare of those around them.
Dennis,
Amazon just distances you from your customers. You don't see them. And
Dennis, who are you loving? Which companies? Which, it could be your local restaurant. It could be anyone just being supportive.
Right. I mean, as it relates to the COVID, really don't know if I could have someone off the top of my head, especially if looking like that as a comparison to Amazon. I would be open to trying something new. I've used them. My sister that I'm visiting with has been getting packages every now. We'd love greater alternatives. I mean, that's kind of one of the things. They are like a Walmart. As my father had always said, you go to Walmart and I get anything. And it's kind of like Amazon. And it's, I personally, just off the top of my head, not really aware of alternative shoppings that that just comes to mind. But I will give a shout out one on, we're talking about, also technology. And one of the fellows I mentioned before this, he writes also for Psychology Today, and he started to write now for OuterBuro.com. And he's been covering the HIV and AIDS epidemic from the health and journalism side of things for about 35 years. And so one of the things as far as providing services that he just posted an article about both in Psychology Today and on OuterBuro.com is that in-person connected service. If it weren't for the HIV/AIDS crisis around the world, we wouldn't have a lot of the infrastructure right now that we have to serve our local communities. And many of those that first started out focused on serving, the HIV and AIDS community has expanded well before COVID ever hit. They turned into serving food, making food, serving meals on a daily basis, doing at-home care visits, doing telemedicine, doing telemental health, and so forth. And so, what AIDS and HIV organizations have has been really a map for this and providing direct connection. So kind of in an anti-Amazon, that's, just click here and order and it's going to get shipped. You ask me what stands out to me, and that's something that's also directly in my neighborhood are organizations who are actually meeting the needs, the actual bare necessities of people on a daily basis.
And Oliver, if you don't mind, we have a few more people from chat. Luigi says that over 30 million unemployed, and Bezos is about to become the world's first billionaire.
Trillionaire with a T.
Trillionaire.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, trillionaire. And it was trillionaire. And a chunk of the media, and he put in his website options for people, not him, to donate food and dollars to Amazon workers. Then Luigi says, question is there a technology out there that can other delivery companies to even compete with Amazon, so Bezos doesn't have a monopoly in both business and so much influence in domestic and international politics to help other delivery companies? And Bruce said, Luigi, the technology is called brick and mortar, shop locally. And Devin said, again, we need companies like Slice. They act as a code aggregator for small pizza shops so they can compete against Domino's. Some way to allow small business to use automation to compete against the big box. Sorry, Esther, and the large e-commerce. And then Luigi just said, but what laws keep Amazon from buying its competition or to crush it? It seems that the laws in place don't do anything. And Bruce said the crisis has helped us realize how few basic needs we really have. Just thought I'd add that. Back to you, Oliver.
And you can see it all on your screen if you just go up to the.
Thank you. So a few minutes left. Would each of the panelists like to mention either a technology, a local company, or a shout out to an individual who's frankly doing fantastic things? It could be around COVID, it could be about D&I, but someone who should get some recognition. Mo, do you want to start with you?
I knew you were going to pick me. I just think, again, it sounds so cliche, but when I would go back to the essential workers with regard, especially, again, the doctors and nurses, I think we've always, as a society, have treated them as essential and heroes and whatever. But I mean, I'm thinking of the people who I've seen in the past 2 months, which have been very few, the grocery store workers, the pharmacy workers, and those who are doing the takeout. Like, those are the ones who have kept us going. And I definitely think they're the heroes of the day, of course, in addition to the medical profession, but that goes without saying. But I really think it highlights what they have done. And I think some others touched on this. For me, I feel like I realized the importance of supporting my local entrepreneurs, even more so than ever. And then even for the ones that are bigger, these bigger retailers that are going down, we're now saying, oh my gosh, they're falling apart, they're going down, but they were going down before because we had strayed from them, right? Because we wanted things differently, either online or fast or what have you. So I just think it's going to make us all think a little bit more about how we purchase, what we need, and and who's essential.
So a few minutes left. Esther, who do you love? Who do you want to give a quick shout out to?
I want to give a shout out to all the care workers, the people who are one way or another helping to create the next generation. And that's care workers caring for mothers who are pregnant and having babies at this time. It's what world are you bringing them into? Child care workers who right now may be on furlough, they're going to be so needed and helpful in the world of the future. That the teachers in the schools, especially the ones who have to help kids make up for lost time, the mental care people who deal with all the people who are undergoing trauma, the parents themselves who are, they've suddenly become full-time child care workers in addition to trying to do their jobs or trying to live without any money because they lost their jobs. It's people caring for one another that really creates human society. And some people do it for free, some people get paid, but it's the most valuable work anybody can do.
Fantastic, thank you. Voltaire, how about you?
So I'd like to echo, you said ideas or solutions. I'll reiterate what I said. And anyone out there who watches this on replay or is watching this now, you're more than welcome to take this concept and do it. Have the essential workers or caregivers or create an app, gamify it, and create a tally system where the more hours they put up, the more grants and resources that they're afforded in their daily lives that apply to startups, paying off student loans. Use the crisis to solve the student loan problem. And then what I would say is get company partners that, if you care about these essential workers so much, have them back a policy that challenges the federal government to be able to give some of these packages and rewards to these frontline people. So I'll leave it there.
Fantastic. Dennis, you've got the last word.
Oh, I was trying to find with my readers on a company I'll have to provide for the show notes later. It is an LGBT entrepreneur that has created a fantastic new app. It is for caregivers of any type to be able to seek anonymous interaction and support from other caregivers. So it's a really wonderful concept. Make sure for all of you caregivers out there that you Google caregivers' rights to be sure that you take care of yourself and you don't let other people tread on you, because if you don't take care of you, you can't be there to take care of others.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. And I'd like to say thank you to the whole panel. Very interesting conversation. And yes, thank you for being here, for your views. I'll now hand it back to Lauren, who has the closing remarks.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We have 3,500 members website. We have 10,000 social media network, 3,000 newsletter network. We'll send these tapes and the other 2 disruptive diversity and education for this webinar out, so everyone can see it again. I'll be splashing it everywhere. Jeff, thank you for being our webinar director and hosting this tonight.
My privilege.
And thank you, everyone. It was great.
Great.
If you have, and if anyone has anything they want to say and want me to add into the notes as I've splashed it around to our 20,000 followers, please email me. And Dennis, I'm looking for that name, that last name that you had.
I will provide that. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.